Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast of Jackson and Kyle. I am Jackson, and I'm joined here, as always, by the man who would have picked Matt Patricia 31st on this, or 32nd on this list. Kyle, how are you doing?
Doing good. I would have picked him 100th, honestly. Wouldn't
Yeah.
even have him on my list.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we got coaches ranking this week. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah, coaches ranking, Kyle. There were about roughly around 4 to 5 times as many comments on our last podcast as we typically get. People very interested in talking about the quarterback rankings. Rankings always gets people's attention.
Yeah. The amazing thing was there are more people upset about Jared Goff only being 12th compared to Justin Fields being ranked 23rd. I thought that was a little bit of a hot take by us, but it was interesting. I found that one very interesting. I will say, we put a lot of data into those quarterback rankings. We use a lot of numbers and statistics. I don't use a lot of statistics for the coaching rankings. This is a lot of kind of vibes check when it comes to these coaches.
Yeah, it's always difficult. We have a chat. It's really hard to rate the new head coaches, and it's kind of hard to rate coaches in general. Of what do you value? I mean, it's a lot of film study and kind of X's and O's I see, but then it's also like how much does the team tend to be prepared? How often do they exceed expectations? And also just how does it feel? Of how good of a leader do they appear to be? What do you hear about this stuff? Which that's such a difficult thing to say because we're not in the locker room, so that's also kind of part of what makes it fun.
I thought we agreed a lot, came close to agreeing on a lot of our stuff when it came to the quarterback rankings. This I think is going to have a lot more variance, and yeah, the young coaches are hard. The new coaches are basically going to be towards the bottom of my list. Hot take, spoiler alert, just to let you know.
Mm-hmm.
And even the second and third year guys I find very difficult to rate, because how do I rate one really good season compared to the body of work of another coach who might have won Super Bowl, stuff like that. So it's hard to evaluate.
Yeah. We have here for the yearly Zach Taylor slander. Well, you come to the right place. Also go Florida Panthers. Yeah, sure. Go Florida Panthers. Why not? Kyle's still, I think, a little bitter about round 1.
Yeah, let's just not talk about it.
Okay, not talk about it. Kyle, we will. I didn't prepare a trivia question or anything. Who do you want to go start off this list?
I'll go first this time. You went first last week, so perfect. I guess we'll just do it that way. And similar to last week, I'll start with the Kansas City Chiefs because Andy Reid is my number one coach. I think that Andy Reid has done a masterful job constructing this offense to Patrick Mahomes' strength. Patrick Mahomes obviously elevates him, but you know what? A lot of great coaches have great quarterbacks too. That helps. And I think Andy Reid has shown time and time again he can make a average quarterback good, he can make a good quarterback great, and he can make a great quarterback legendary. And that's what he's doing right now with this team and with this offense, and he continues to do it. And I think one of the best things about Andy Reid with this Chiefs era, with this Mahomes era, is the game management stuff was supposed to be Andy Reid's downfall, especially clock management. And Mahomes basically takes that out of his hand. They can score in 13 seconds because it's Patrick Mahomes. Right. So, that you don't even have to worry about that as much with Andy Reid because Patrick Mahomes cures that. But at the same time, Reid is a brilliant coach. He's done a brilliant job with this roster, and he's had good coordinators in the past. He's had good, play callers on the defensive side of the ball, which is probably his weakest side. And he continues to do a really good job. And this team's going to compete for Super Bowls for a long time.
Yeah, I think the knocks against Reid are fair. I think the game management stuff is fair to knock. I think that he has had bad moments in the playoffs in big games. I mean, I think I still think about that Super Bowl against Tampa Bay as I don't know what everyone in the world knew that they were going to be playing 2 safety deep coverages all game, seemingly except for the Chiefs in that one. But obviously, and I think the other knock would be, yes, it helps to have Patrick Mahomes, but everything else is very true. The X's and O's are incredible. The guy has 2 Super Bowl rings. I have him at number 2 on my list, though. I did. I had someone ahead of him.
All right. Well, that'll create some intrigue. I mean, there's a couple guys at the top that I can negotiate with, honestly. I feel pretty confident about my top 4. Then there might be a small gap, but you could talk me into the top 5 being its own class. So I'm curious to have who you have here.
Yeah, okay. Well, number 2, I think this is going to be a hot take. I think people are going to be surprised by this. My number 1 quarterback on my board is Kyle Shanahan. Coach, yes. Sorry. Quarterback would be wild if I had that would be a really hot take. Number two head coach on this list. Number one on my board is the only guy who you could say, yeah, sure, he's going into the next season with a guy who's drafted last overall in the draft, but it's Kyle Shanahan. He'll figure it out. The offense will still be one of the best offenses in football. I think that there's no coach that adds more value to his team than Shanahan does with his play calling. Again, totally fair to say there's knocks against him as well. Some of the big game play calling has he's made mistakes. There's no denying that. But I think that the overall good outweighs the bad more than anyone else on this list. So I have him at number one.
I can't fault it. I have him third on my list, and I think that he is a brilliant play caller. I think he's a brilliant tactician, and I just think overall he is probably the single coach that can maximize each individual player the most, right? Like he finds a way to maximize his individual players more than any other coach, especially on the offense side of the ball. And he's an offensive guy, so obviously that makes sense. And the other thing too, when it comes to Shanahan, is he has been gutted time and time again when it comes to his staff. His staff has been gutted multiple times, and each time he just comes back with a new face running the offense or running the defense, and it's just fine. And he hires good coaches on his staff. He hires good coordinators. He finds ways to maximize the personnel, because the thing with San Francisco is they have such a deep roster, but there are some highly paid players on that roster. Deebo Samuel is an expensive wide receiver. Now they have Christian McCaffrey, he's an expensive running back. They have expensive guys on the defensive side of the ball, and he still maximizes that roster 1 through 53 really well. And I agree with you. I think he's fantastic because of it.
Yeah. Well, let's just keep with the hot take thing. If Kyle Shanahan was coaching the Chiefs and Andy Reid was coaching the 49ers, who do you think? I guess, would both teams get worse? I guess maybe that's not a fair thing. I think both teams probably get worse in that scenario.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I could see Kansas City. I don't know if Shanahan could maximize the Chiefs more than Reid has.
Right. That's because Reid and Mahomes are such a perfect fit. That's why I kind of mid sentence said maybe it's not a great point, because it's just such a good fit there.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't shock me if Kansas City's as good with Shanahan. I don't know. I don't think he could make them better, honestly. I just don't see how he could do that.
Could Reid make the 49ers better?
Probably not. But I mean, at the same time, Alex Smith, ironically, San Francisco and Kansas City. But I mean, at the same time, he has found ways to also make, Alex Smith was a pretty good quarterback, but at the same time, he has found ways to make pretty good quarterbacks look really good in his offenses too. I think he's found similar ways to have that success. And I think if he had San Francisco's roster, they'd be really good still. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's totally fair. You could argue either side. They feel like, they're 1A and 1B for me. We also have, you don't knock Shanahan for taking a kicker in the third round. Again, keep in mind, we're evaluating coaching, not evaluating any decision making that has happened. We didn't knock Bill O'Brien for trading DeAndre Hopkins when we did this a while back.
Yeah, it's just your ability to coach your personnel, not your ability to acquire personnel.
Yes. Number 3, Kyle, where are you going?
Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin was second on my list, and I think that Mike Tomlin could take a Pee Wee football team and make them competitive. I just think it's that point where he finds ways to, I don't want to say maximize again, because I feel like I've been saying that a lot, but he finds ways to get the best out of his teams. He
puts players in position to succeed.
Yeah, I don't think he's the best talent developer or anything. I think Shanahan hasn't beaten as far as talent developing, but I think as far as finding ways to win games, Tomlin does it just about better than anybody, it feels like, time and time again. And it's almost like he just reminds me a lot. He's like the Eric Spoelstra of the NFL for me, where it just seems like a Mike Tomlin team's more prepared than anybody else all the time. And I don't think it's a fluke. And it's not any individual player. It's that Mike Tomlin always has his team ready to go.
There's no team that consistently overperforms expectations than the Steelers. Every year, if they have a 6-win team, they win 9 games. If they have a 9-win team, they win 12 games. I mean, that's just what the Steelers do, is they consistently overperform. Again, I think some knocks on him, I guess, would be he's certainly not the X's and O's guy that Reid or Shanahan are. And that's why he was third on my list as well. But It's just at a certain point, you have to just look at the results and say, there's no business some of these teams should be getting above 500. And he's just basically willing them to get there. He is the kind of the constant in that. So yeah, I think Mike Tomlin's been a top three on my list every single time we've done this.
Yeah. And it's one of those questions, again, if you go back to the hypothetical you asked, if he's running the Chiefs, I don't know if he runs that same offense that Reed would. And he's had good offenses in the past when he had Roethlisberger at his best, Antonio Brown, those sort of things. I don't know if he's running that Kansas City offense quite the same way, but I do think he finds ways to win a lot of games still, regardless of the talent. And if he had that team, he'd probably be competing for Super Bowls too.
Yeah. And he made Antonio Brown seem normal for a while.
For a while, yeah. It just seems like it's going back to my Spoelstra thing. It's a culture, it's almost like a Steelers culture that, just kind of resonates with that team, and they have a certain attitude. They have a certain style of play that they've just had for decades, and I think Tomlin plays a big part in that too.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on. I have 4 quarterbacks in my elite tier. This one's going to be a hot take, Kyle. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
If you thought last one was a hot take, give me Nick Sirianni here at number 4. I was really impressed with Nick Sirianni. I mean, first off, I love a good analytically inclined coach, and that's what he is. The fourth down decision making was a big part of why they nearly won a Super Bowl. We know he can hire good coordinators. Both his coordinators just got poached this offseason. He's someone who I think, you have to give him some credit for developing Jalen Hurts. And I think you have to give him credit for taking, completely change. I don't know if completely changed the culture, but, turning this into a winning culture, turning this into a championship contending team. Yes, it helps that he gets to coach the Eagles. You have Howard Roseman at the top, who makes a lot of good decisions. But this team is another one where I just think that the X's and O's were great last year. The game management stuff is great. So I have no knocks against Sirianni, really. So I'm going to put him at 4.
Yeah, I thought I was a little hot putting him at 7th on my list, but he certainly performed like one of the best coaches in the league last year. I have some quarrels with his defensive approach last year, and we're gonna get to that towards the end of the show. I think he I did have some qualms with it, but at the same time, like you can't knock the results. They had a good defense numbers wise overall last season, and like you said, he got the job done. And the analytics are real, and part of that is it's easy when you have Jalen Hurts to say, I'm going to get every 4th and 2, 4th and 1 imaginable because this kid's a tank. So yeah, I think he did a really good job with that stuff, and I thought he coached his team really well. I think the only thing I'm waiting on is a little more experience, and that's why I had him 7th. And it's probably unfair to say that, but at the same time, like there's just a couple guys on my list that have decades of coaching experience. I just can't put him over right now.
Sure, the sample size is a very fair point. But again, I also think about like the quarterback sneak thing. It's like there's been other great offensive lines with like big quarterbacks, and like no one's. Like, it's so simple, but it's like I feel like we always just sit here and say, why not just run a quarterback sneak every 3rd down and 1? Kind of like that he just does that. Like, oh yeah, like, we finally have a guy who does that.
Yeah, this is easy. It's not. He's not. Overthinking it. I definitely think I like him a lot. I was really impressed with his first year. Obviously, they made the Super Bowl in year 2 with him, so it's been an impressive run for him, and I think he definitely has the chops.
Yeah, I agree. Number 5, where are you going?
All right, this would feel insane at this point if he went any lower. It's the greatest coach of all time, greatest coach of the Super Bowl era, 6 Super Bowls. It's Bill Belichick. Here's the thing. Hiring your staff, we just said personnel is not a part of it. The one thing is hiring your staff is a big part of being a coach.
Yeah.
And I thought he astronomically failed at hiring and putting in staff to let his players and team succeed last season. And that's where he's probably getting knocked here to number 5 because he hired probably the worst staff in the league. Even if I think the Steve Belichick thing's a little played out. I actually think Steve seems like a pretty good coach. But you can't have a defensive coordinator coach your offense. You just can't. That's not there's no acceptable answer to that, And I think that was just a huge mistake on his part. But at the same time, once again, this team won more games than you probably expect based on the talent of the roster because week in and week out, he's probably the best game plan head coach in the league. He just straight up is, and that's what he does really well. He game plans, he prepares his team to the highest level. He has the highest set of expectations as a head coach, and that continues to work. So I think if you take, the staff is a problem, the fourth down decision making is a bit of a problem at this point now. Although I can't really blame him when the offense can't get 3 yards all the time, anyways. But I still think Bill Belichick is one of the best, game planners and preparation coaches in the league by far, and so he's number 5.
Okay, well, we're gonna fight. You're not gonna like this, Kyle. I'm at 17. I think Bill Belichick's last year was a disaster. I think it was. Listen, I'll say this to start off. Bill Belichick is the best defensive play caller still in football today. Like, that's just when it comes to defensive X and O's. He's, you could argue he's up there with Reed and with Kyle Shanahan. But what do we always say on this podcast? It's an offensive league at this point. And as you brought it up, the Matt Patricia thing was inexcusable. Like, that's a fireable offense in most scenarios, but he's Bill Belichick, so he's earned that pass, right? I'm not saying they should have fired him for it. Yeah. But like, if Pete Carroll had the season that Bill Belichick had last year, who's like someone who's a well-respected coach, I think he's getting fired. I really do. I think that was that move, and also just I think he's one of the worst. I think he's one of the worst game management guys still in the league at this point. So while the X's, I still have him as around an average head coach because of how good he is with the defensive play calling and that stuff. I think the offensive play calling was debatably the worst in football last year, and the game management stuff is one of the worst in football. So you're failing at 2/3 of your job at this point. I guess I don't know how much count, because there's also the the leadership stuff, which he obviously is one of the best of all time at and still is, and the defensive play calling, which is great. But I don't know. There's too many issues with me. I love Bill Belichick. There's just too many issues right now.
Yeah, and we'll see how it looks this year. Now that he has a real offensive coach who's going to install a system and kind of run that. We'll see how that looks. I guess the thing is, there's a lot of faults with what Belichick's doing right now. Does another coach step into this team with this roster and win more games than he did last year? I don't really think there's more.
I think they underperformed last year. I do think they underperformed last year. I don't agree that they overperformed their talent level. I think there's plenty of talent. Part of it is Kendrick Bourne sitting on the bench this whole time because they're benching him for whatever. I think that there was more. I think that there was talent. Mac Jones. The fact that he had such a disastrous year, is that because Mac Jones isn't good, or is it because he wasn't put in a position to succeed? He certainly wasn't put in a position to succeed. And I think that as of right now, the job is develop Mac Jones. And that's the number one thing you should be focused on right now. And they're doing a disastrous job of that. I don't know. I think that I don't know if league, to me, I think if you get a league average head coach in there, I think they win about the same amount of games. I do.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I can't fault a lot of the criticisms right now because it was bad. It was horrible. And I think the pedigree of Bill Belichick, I think, still matters a little bit.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I think he needs to learn to modernize a little bit. He's almost becoming, one of the amazing things about Reed and why he's at the top of my list is he has always been able to kind of stay ahead of the curve with a lot of this stuff. And I think for a long time, Belichick was. When you look at 2010, this team, or even go back to 2007, this team won a lot because he was able to spread the ball out. He was able to kind of run a sort of a spread offense with Brady, Welker, Moss, all those guys. He seems to go on the way. He seems to be going almost, archaic at this point with the way, he seems to be going backwards at this point.
Yeah. That's my thing. And again, I think last year I might have had him at number 1 on this list. I can't remember. I really think it's a 1-year thing that was such a disappointment. But hopefully he can improve. And showed it last year was maybe more of a fluke than anything. But again, maybe don't hire your friend who is a bad defensive coordinator to be your offensive play caller. Maybe that's an idea.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Number 6. This is me. I'm going Sean Payton. Number 5 on my board. Guys won a Super Bowl. He's very similar to Kyle Shanahan in that the team's just the offense is always overperformed pretty massively when he is the play caller, which is very rare. I think people think that offensive play calling tends to matter more than it actually does. A lot of times it is just talent and who you have on the roster, but there are exceptions, and Payton's always been one of those exceptions. The question is, we haven't seen him coach in a year. That's a bit of a concern. And we haven't seen him coach that much without Drew Brees, although he did look good, with a year without Drew Brees. But still, And even with Drew Brees, who wasn't elite anymore, he looked good then. But still, those are kind of the questions. But I think he, 5 on my board, 6 here.
Yeah, I had him 6 on my board, so this fits in perfectly. I'm excited to see what he can do with this team, and I'm excited to see if he can fix Russell Wilson a little bit. I was pretty high on the Broncos last year. Obviously, it ended in disaster, basically from week 1.
Mm-hmm.
But I still watched that team and did not think. I mean, what did they? I got to look up the record here. It's been a while since the season ended. They finished 5-12. I didn't think that was a 5-win football team. I just didn't.
Right.
I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I think that team. Did I? Should I have picked them to win the division preseason? Probably not. But do I think it would have been crazy to see that football team specifically last year win 9-10 games, compete with the Chargers for a wild card spot? I don't think it'd be that crazy. And I think if Russell Wilson plays better, which is his number one job coming into this situation, I think they have a chance to be a competitive football team next season. I'm excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, it should be very interesting. Number 7, where are you going?
Let's just go John Harbaugh here. He was 5th on my list, and won 10 games last year. I think you could argue maybe he was a little too loyal to the offensive coordinator. When it seemed like even before last season, things were kind of incomplete with that, and it that offense had got a little stale. But at the same time, like, he missed Lamar Jackson for how many games, and he still won 10 games, and a lot of those were 1-score wins that they found ways to flip into their favor. And even going back to that, the playoff game too against Cincinnati with Tyler Huntley, he had the ball on the 1-yard line, basically, giving his team a chance to win the game. So I think John Harbaugh is still a really good coach.
Yeah, I like him a lot too. I did have him at 10 on my list, but it's kind of similar to how you felt about Nick Sirianni a little bit, just in the sense of, like, I still like him a lot. It's not gonna have many knocks on Harbaugh or anything. I just had a little bit lower on my list. There's a couple guys I liked a little bit more, but yeah, I mean, again, another one of those guys where it's like the X's and O's aren't really his. That's not his specialty. Like, he tends to hire pretty good coordinators, so he does an all right job there. But, like, you're not necessarily consistently wowed with the X's and O's. But he is someone. The comparison of him and Belichick, he is someone who seemingly has gotten with the times. He adapted to this new style of, I mean, more than anybody, with the Lamar Jackson stuff, and not just getting Lamar Jackson, but saying, no, this is how we're running our offense, is with using his legs, which kind of seems obvious now, but at the time was definitely innovative. So. I don't know how much. I think the one thing that you have to hold against him a little bit is still only one playoff win in the Lamar Jackson era, and that was a wild card win. That's going to get held against him until they can go on a deep run.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how that flips. I gotta say, for this offense, though, there's no more excuses, right? They change coordinators, they pay Lamar, they add a bunch of receiver talent. You got to see, this has got to look like MVP Lamar Raven season, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I think that this is if it doesn't work this year, then you're starting to wonder what the ceiling is on this team.
Yeah, so I think that's completely fair. But I still think he maximizes. He's been compared a lot to Tomlin because they're in the same division, and I think that's a little unfair to him. But he still finds ways to maximize his talent too at a very high level. I think he's an excellent game manager. I think he's pretty well thought out with the analytics, and I think he does a lot of that stuff really well still.
Yeah, I agree. Number 6 on my list, 8 on our list. Give me Sean McDermott of the Buffalo Bills, another guy who you could hold sort of lack of playoff success against him. Only has a handful of wins, but definitely has a handful of losses when they were favored, which is kind of what's going to get held against him. But again, completely changed the Bills. Took the Bills, who were a mess of a franchise. I believe had the I can't remember if they had the longest playoff drought. I think they did have the longest playoff drought when he took them over. It's turned him into a consistent championship contender. I think he deserves credit for, at least in part, for developing Josh Allen. And I think that he's again another team where I feel like Buffalo tends to be pretty aware of what's going on, tends to be ready for these types of things, and another guy who I feel like has very unique game plans sometimes, isn't afraid to say, you know what, we're throwing the ball 40 times in this game if we have to. Like Sean McDermott a lot. I'm giving him the number 8 spot here.
I like him a little bit. I'm starting to have some questions, I guess. I moved him down a little bit. I had him 13th this year.
Okay.
And I guess my question with Sean McDermott is, like, is he a high floor, low ceiling guy?
Because explain.
I just feel like has this team fallen short of it? I mean, it's a little unfair when the expectations is Super Bowl because this team is good enough to be that now, and a lot of that has to do with him. But
Mm-hmm.
is it fair to say that, especially in some of these big games, when you talk about some of the big games he's gone into, it feels like he's a little overmatched sometimes as far as coaching. And it seems like game planning is a little overmatched in some of these big games, and that's what caused Buffalo. You know, if we're gonna go by coaching just specifically in some of these big playoff games, Zach Taylor took his lunch money in the playoffs. And this is not a pro Zach Taylor podcast. So, at what point do we start to criticize some of these playoff shortcomings where it feels like he is overmatched by the other sideline?
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't Zach Taylor who was out coaching Sean McDermott by saying, "Hey, let's have our offensive line for some reason completely dominate the Bills' defensive line," like what happened in that game. Like I don't know if I don't know how much I hold that against. I don't know how I don't. That was a weird game. Just everything went wrong for the Bills. I guess you could consider that coaching if you wanted to, but I don't know. I didn't look at that game and say, "Oh, like they were getting out game plan there." As much as I sort of saw like to me, I thought just the Bengals were better and just the Bills kept making mistakes, which again, I guess that's coaching. But to me, one is not a trend for me. And I don't think that's the only real time I would say they got completely, they completely blew a game they should have won or at least could have won.
Well, I think you're taking the 13 seconds thing.
Sure. But I mean, I guess so. But so you're saying that they should have had a better game plan for the 13-second situation. I guess it's fair. I think it's fine. I think those are fair things to hold against them. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but I think I would say I think you could do that with pretty much with everyone else on this list though as well. Is my point, my counter argument to that.
Yeah, I think you can nitpick a lot of guys. That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I have some questions about, can he?
It's fair to bring up. It totally is.
Yeah. Can he maximize this team fully? And is he going to get this team over the hump? But he's put Buffalo in a position where they're competing for Super Bowls, which wasn't the case for a very long time.
Yeah, should be interesting. Let's move on to we can talk about some of these guys all day, but we got to move on. Yeah. Number 9, where are you going?
I was impressed with this team last year. I was impressed with this coach, and we have given this coach a lot of heat over the years. So I think he deserves a little bit of flowers to be able to put together what he did last season. That's Pete Carroll. He's won a Super Bowl. He's gotten to the top of the mountain before. And it just seems like year to year, the Seahawks perform pretty well. There's not really a lot of disappointing Seahawks seasons that you can go back and look at. And yeah, I mean, he is not the most innovative coach I've ever seen in my life, but clearly guys like playing for him, and clearly he finds ways to kind of raise the floor of a team, even a team like the Seahawks that we didn't have high expectations for last year. So I think Pete Carroll's a pretty good coach.
Number 9 is a bit high for me. This is definitely one of his best years as a head coach. I think this is one whole. You could argue this was his second best year. When you talk about for his legacy, his second best year. Because even this year they went to the Super Bowl and lost. It's like, well, the 1 yard line play call was constantly talked about. So it's like I think almost this year of making the playoffs without Russell Wilson. I still just wonder with the Seahawks with all this stuff, like how much of it is them being smart and doing stuff, and how much of it was just Geno Smith happened to be good and they got really lucky.
It could have been that, but he also was willing to take that risk too.
Sure.
So he was able to get the best out of Geno and let his Pro Bowl quarterback go. So I feel like that plays a part in it then, right?
Sure. Yeah. And he trusted Geno. He had he's the one who, again, put Geno in his position to succeed. Hard to really argue against it. I guess, I had him at 14, but, we're right around the same area here, 9-14.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see him with this team's going to have expectations next season. And it'll be interesting to see how they perform.
Yeah, I agree. Number 10, I'm surprised this guy fell this far. Sean McVay, who I had at number 7 on my list, falls all the way to 10 though, given the guys I had above. I mean, guys won a Super Bowl 2 years ago. I think that a knock against McVay is we have seen sometimes play calling get stale with him. It hasn't always been a consistency thing. He hasn't necessarily built a consistent championship contender despite 2 Super Bowl appearances. Feels like those are kind of the only 2 years where we really felt like they were championship contenders, they went to the championship. So again, you deserve some credit for that. Hey, when you have an opportunity, he makes the most of it. So he's, a great head coach, but there are some knocks as well, which I guess is why he falls to 10.
Yeah, I mean, I had him ninth, so it's just one of those things where it depends on the
Mhm.
list goes down. We each went below our own list for guys. So, I had him ninth. He goes 10th here. And yeah, I mean, it was a bad year. It was a bad year. I don't know how he would have been able to do. I don't know. He would have had to work a lot of miracles to make that team more competitive based on the injuries they had, based on just the poor offseason they had, all that kind of stuff. It just didn't seem to work. And I don't think he's a bad coach because of it. But I do think he's gonna need to have a bounce back year.
Yeah, I agree. Number 11, where are you going?
Another guy with I thought just had a bad season, but I still think is a good coach. Let's go Matt LaFleur here.
Mhm.
Still a very good offensive play caller. He was 10th on my list here. He's up 10th on my list. He's going 11th here. Good offensive play caller. I'm shocked Joe Barry is coming back to the Packers, honestly. Like, that's something I'm kind of circling is like, can he fix his defense? Because he was such a bad defensive coordinator last season.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I thought overall he's still a really good coach. And, the defense didn't work and they got to fix that.
Yeah, LaFleur definitely. I had another guy who we both had higher on our individual list than he goes on this list. I had him at 9 on my list. Yeah, again, someone with clear positives and clear faults. Great X's and O's guy. Got the most out of Aaron Rodgers. The clear faults are somebody, the playoff moments once again. I mean, I still think about the Tampa Bay game, right, where he decides to kick the field goal there instead of let Aaron Rodgers go for it. I think that was the wrong decision. And some of the defensive stuff is definitely what's knocked him at this point. But again, it'll be interesting to see where he's at in a post Aaron Rodgers world at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, this could be a big season for the Matt LaFleur legacy because,
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't have the 13 win streak anymore and he doesn't have Aaron Rodgers. So let's see what he can do.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, let's just move on. Let's keep it rolling. Why don't we? Another guy who's been to a conference championship. How about Mike Vrabel of the Tennessee Titans? He was 8 on my board, goes to 12. So again, we have some differences here just in the way our boards are falling. But yeah, I like Vrabel a lot. I think Vrabel is, again, very similar to the Mike Tomlin, to the John Harbaugh of it's not necessarily the X's and O's that you're constantly focused on with Vrabel, but it's more so the way the teams get up to play, the way his teams always seemingly play other teams tough. I mean, that Jacksonville game is a prime example of they really, they had that game won until that Josh Dobbs fumble. Vrabel is just a guy who, for whatever reason, his teams consistently overperform. They're always ready, and the X's and O's are still pretty good. So Vrabel here at 12.
Yeah, he was next on my list. He's 11. And it would be really fun to see him with a good quarterback, like a really good quarterback,
Uh-huh.
because I think he prepares his teams really well. I think he does a lot of things right as far as coaching. I just don't think he's ever had a roster that's good enough to win a Super Bowl. And I know they were the
Right.
1 seed. I think we all can agree that that wasn't the best 1 seed of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels like that, he's maximized this offense, I think, to its absolute peak, kind of with this Derrick Henry centered offense. But it'd just be nice to see him with a quarterback and weapons to say, let's see what you can do with an expansive offense and as one of the favorites in the league, kind of thing. But I don't know if he's going to get that.
Yeah, and even that, that playoff game against Cincinnati, which I guess is like the one you could knock him for. It's like Ryan Tannehill threw 3 picks in that game. It's like, what are you going to do at that point?
Yeah. So it's tough. Like I think he's great. It's just he's never, it like this was my thing kind of with McDermott. Like we did the hypothetical earlier. Do you
Mhm.
think Mike Vrabel wins the Super Bowl in Buffalo?
If he's with the Buffalo Bills,
Yeah, if he's the head coach of the Bills, do you think he can win that Super Bowl?
I think he could, but I wouldn't necessarily say if he was the head coach for the past several years that he would have won a super. If he started coaching the Bills when McDermott did, I don't know if they're even in position to be a championship contender. I don't know if he would have been able to develop Josh Allen. It's sort of like it's almost like a chicken or the egg type situation where I think
Yeah.
if you plopped him into last year, I think they would have had a better chance. But like I don't know if they would have been that team with Variable there the whole time.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. So it would
Mm-hmm.
have been interesting, but yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I still think he's a terrific coach.
Yeah, I agree. Number 13, where are you going?
13th, this was 12th on my board. this is I think he was the coach of the year. Yeah, coach of the year, Brian Daboll. This is probably one of the, outside Sirianni for year 3, this is the earliest I had a year 2 coach. Look, he did a terrific job in year 1. He's going to be asked to back that up again and prove it again. But Daboll did a terrific job with Daniel Jones. Not that Daniel Jones was a superstar, but he did a very good job of minimizing Daniel Jones' mistake, and I think that goes a long way. And he got a Giants team that nobody really had expectations for. He got them winning a lot of football games, and they won a playoff game. So I don't think that's nothing.
Yeah, no team exceeded expectations given their talent level more than the Giants did last year, right? And we've seen him now. I know we're only talking head coach, but he did develop Josh Allen. I've been giving McDermott a lot of credit for it, but obviously Daboll was the guy who was the offensive coordinator, who probably had the biggest hand in that. So he deserves credit for it. He did get the best year out of Daniel Jones, and so good that Daniel Jones got paid $40 million a year. I guess the one thing you have to question, I have a number 12 on my list as well. So interesting, 12 on both of our lists, goes at 13. The one reason why I didn't have him in the top 10 compared to some of these other guys is it's pure. We've seen 1 year of this, and you do have to wonder to some degree. I mean, and the main thing we all like about him, the X's and O's were good, but the main thing we all like about him is that the team just exceeded expectations. And again, how much of that was because he's a great head coach? That's the most likely outcome, but there is that chance of maybe they just got lucky to some degree, and that's why I want to see another year before I put him higher.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think they had some luck in their favor, right? They had a negative point differential, but won 9 games and tied one. So they definitely had some luck in their favor. I don't know if it was a whole lot. I mean, I still think he did a really good job in times, and I thought you could point to specific games that I thought Daboll did a really good job to help his team win a football game, and I think that's something that was really impressive.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's because he's a great head coach. I'm just saying that's why I have him lower.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's the inexperience factor, and that's why he was outside the top 10. And we've done this with basically every year we do this list. The young head coach who wins Coach of the Year doesn't go in our top 10. It's like, well, he hasn't really, he's done it one time. We got to see it again.
Yeah, and Coach of the Year is obviously a flawed award anyway. It rarely goes to the guy who had the best coach, although I think he earned it last year.
Yeah.
Number 14, I am going to go with a guy who is technically another first-year head coach, although he's been a head coach before, Doug Peterson, who I have at number 11 on my board. Listen, I was thinking about this today, and I'm like, that Jacksonville job, in hindsight, we should have looked at as the best job possible to get as a new head coach, because you're replacing Urban Meyer, a guy who, literally all you have to do is be an adult, and you're going to look like at least a better head coach than that. And also you have Trevor Lawrence, this incredible prospect who didn't have a great year 1, but it's like, what does that matter? And Doug Peterson did a great job developing, which again, that was his job, develop Trevor Lawrence. Nothing else matters. And he got more than just that. He developed Trevor Lawrence. He got them to a playoff game. They overcame the 27-point lead, or 27, or was it 27 or 28 points to the Chargers? The 20, I thought, yeah. Overcame a big lead against the Chargers in the playoffs, and even played the Chiefs tough, albeit the Chiefs without Patrick Mahomes tough. Got to give Peterson a lot of credit for his and he's won a Super Bowl before, by the way, might I add. So 14, if anything, might be a little low. Although again, there's been some issues in some off years as well with Peterson.
Yeah. I completely agree. I mean, I had him 15th on my list, and I think he's done a terrific job. I agree with you I agree with basically everything you said. I think he did a terrific job last year. I really liked him in Philadelphia, although it kind of got stale, and the Carson Wentz thing obviously was a disaster. But yeah, I mean, I think overall he was able to maximize the talent a little bit there, and I'm interested to see, once again, this is another team that now they're going to have expectations. How does it work out? Because once they had expectations in Philadelphia, it kind of went sideways. How does that work this time around?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it was a complete disaster right after they won the Super Bowl in Philadelphia. But we'll see if it goes better this year for the Jaguars. Number 15, where are you going?
14th on my list, my man Dan Campbell.
Okay,
did a really good job with Detroit, I thought. He doesn't look it, but he's, we've talked about this. He's a very analytically inclined coach, and he's not afraid to kind of push the button, especially when it comes to fourth down decision making. And I thought he was really impressive last season. And, I think he's hired a good staff. I think Ben Johnson might be the best offensive coordinator in football right now, and that's gone a long way to helping him succeed. And there just seems to be sort of a leadership thing to him where guys really like to play for him, and it seems like that there is a level of optimism in Detroit that hasn't been there in what, decades ever, and a lot of that has to do with, it seems like, the way he's establishing this locker room.
Yeah, I'm sure it was who was that guy that was winning NFL championships in like the 50s? There's been optimism in Detroit before.
Yeah, I guess you can go way back.
Yeah, okay, but no, you're right. Yeah, I had him at 18, but that kind of feels low. I feel like I was probably too low. But it's just hard. There's plenty
You've
of good.
always been a Dan Campbell hater.
A little bit. Well, I want to see it. I want to see him. I want to see him lead a team to the playoffs. That's what I want. And lead. I see the potential in Dan. To me, Dan Campbell's like a great prospect, right? I feel like him about the way I feel about like Trevor Lawrence, or maybe even that's not totally fair but like someone who I've seen flashes of greatness. I feel like the teams over exceed expectations, but the reality is it's a lot easier to get a team that should go 1-16 to go 5-12 than it is to get a team that should go 12-5 to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, sure. I thought the 9-win season was impressive.
It was. Mm-hmm.
I thought he did a lot of good stuff last year. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing holding him back is he's got to show that he can get to the next step, and then the next step would be a Super Bowl. But I mean, if you look at it, he won as many games as Mike Tomlin and Brian Daboll last year, and Pete Carroll.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone had Detroit at that kind of expectations.
There were some Lions fans who did, but most people did not. No, I think it was very good. I have no issue. I agree with you that I think 18 is too low on my list. If I would do this again, I'd probably have him a little higher on the list. But again, I want to see it. I want to see what Dan Campbell can do. And technically, Brian Daboll did win one more game than those two guys because he won a playoff game.
That's true. Fair enough.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I mean, I just want to see it. That's my only critique with Dan Campbell. He checks every box so far.
Yeah, he's done everything he needed to do. But now this team, like I said, this team has expectations now.
Yeah, exactly. So let's see. So that was number. Wait, was that number? I think I wrote the wrong number down. Was that what number was Dan Campbell?
Was it 15?
I think probably 15 because I wrote 14 down on my list. But so we'll assume that that's the case, and it's we're on to 16 now. Someone, if you remembered in chat, let me know. But yes, sorry about that. Because I'm doing the even numbers. Number 16, give me Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh, another guy who, again, we're in this tier. These are all guys I have in sort of my third tier of head coaches. Of like, I do want good head coaches, but there's a but there. And for Saleh, it's I just he hasn't made the playoffs yet. He hasn't had the sustained success yet. And now we will really get to see if he can with the addition of Aaron Rodgers. The defense is incredibly well coached. And I thought the offense made the most of what they could have. I mean, I don't think anyone's making the playoffs with Zach Wilson and Mike White as their head coach, or as their quarterback, excuse me. But he made the right call going to Mike White when he did. I thought that he did a good job of, saying, okay, we're moving off of Zach Wilson here. That was the correct decision. It went off the rails a bit at the end, but I don't think that was his fault. And he's developed a young talent incredibly well. They had both rookie of the years last year. So big fan of Saleh. Feels like a great motivator as well. I have him at 13 on my board, 16 on this list.
Yeah, I had Saleh. I have him 20th. Like, I can't fault him too much for a lot of it, but at the same time, I think he's a good coach, and I think he's going to continue to be a good coach. And I think that, I don't think he's going to be a problem this next season. However, there's a few things like, number one, do you put any of the blame for the lack of development with your number 2 overall pick?
No, I think quarterbacks are weird. I don't really. I mean, I thought they put Zach Wilson in a position to succeed, and like he wasn't good. Like I don't know what you could have done about that.
Yeah. I guess that's fair. But at the same time, like, I don't know. The quarterback situation was bad last year, so maybe he does get a pass with that. But at the same time, I felt like there was a lot of winnable games last year that they didn't win. And I don't know. Is it fair to say that even despite the quarterback, this team underperformed a little bit this past season? Like, I think that's a little fair.
Interesting. So I'm trying to think back. So they went 7-10, and things definitely kind of went off the rails. towards the end there, I would say. But I'm just trying to look and think back of what exactly happened. I mean, I don't know. I don't really. I didn't feel that way. I mean, I guess the one you could point to would be like the last game of the season against the Dolphins, but at the same time, like they were out of the playoffs at that point. So kind of their last. I mean, they did end the season on a what was it, a 6-game losing streak. So I guess there may be some wins in there, but there's no one in particular I'm like they should have won that. Like they could have beaten the Lions, I guess, down the stretch. They could have beaten the Vikings down the stretch, but I don't know. I think things just kind of got off the rails. I wouldn't. It's a fair criticism. It's a fair point. I'll say that, but I'm not going to hold it against him too much.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's just, I think it's going to be interesting. I think this is going to be a very telling year for Salah.
Mm-hmm. All right, number 17. Where are you going?
Don't worry, JDM Wizard. I have him right here. That's number 16 on my list. He is going 17 on the board. That is Mike McDaniel. Offensive guru. That certainly was very prevalent in year one for McDaniel. I was impressed. I guess the one thing, it's a little unfair to compare people to Kyle Shanahan, but he came from the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, and Miami wanted him to be the Shanahan. Tua went out and the season was a disaster. That's kind of what it went down to. And they're going to kind of run it back with this offense, which I don't blame them because the offense was really good when Tua played. But what is the solution for McDaniel? Because Shanahan had some success with other quarterbacks. Can McDaniel find a way, if Tua gets hurt again, to have success? But he was very good in year one, and I thought checked a lot of boxes. And he's going to, he brings in a new defensive guy, and I think that's going to go a long way to Miami's success. So I got McDaniel here.
Yeah, I don't know how much I hold against the fact that he couldn't get much out of Skylar Thompson against him. They did add Mike. They did add Mike White, so I guess that could maybe help. I don't know. Hey, they lost to the Bills by 3 points in the playoff game with Skylar Thompson out there, so it wasn't a total disaster. Although again, definitely would have looked better if Tua was there. The X's and O's offensively were great. Again, having Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle helps with that. Having Tua play great helps with that. But he deserves credit, I think, for getting the most out of Tua that we've seen so far. To me, the biggest issue was the defensive stuff we saw last year. He took over a defense that was good the year before, and it was a mess last year. But he also made the right move of not saying, "Well, this is my defensive coordinator. Got to give him several years." Being proactive here by getting Vic Fangio in the building, which I think could be good. So I have high expectations for McDaniel and Dolphins next year.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. I do think, part of the schematic change that the Dolphins made last year was, as much of an upgrade as it was from the offense, it was probably just as big of a downgrade going from Brian Flores to Mike McDaniel on defense. Right. And that was very prevalent. So getting a guy like Vic Fangio, adding Jalen Ramsey, there's no excuses for that defense to be bad now, right? So it's got to be awesome.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to my favorite head coach in the league. The guy I like, Zach Taylor, goes here at 18. Was 16 on my board. Listen, I actually thought last year was a pretty solid year from Zach Taylor. I think that he is someone who's getting better as a head coach year in and year out. And that's something that's worth mentioning. He obviously was 32nd on our list the year before they went to the Super Bowl, which again, coming off a year where they were the worst team in football and then the 5th worst team in football. Not that unreasonable to put him as the worst head coach. And I do think that there still are some issues, but I don't know. At this point, the issues I mostly had, I feel like he's kind of understood now what his team is. It's taken him some time, but at the end of the day, I don't know. Zach Taylor feels, I had him at 16. He feels like a, mediocre, middle of the road head coach to me.
Yeah, I had him basically next on my list. He was 17th on my board. Listen, he takes a long time to adjust his game plan and adjust his strategy, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But when he does get there, it's usually the right adjustment. So, it just takes a while sometimes for him, it seems like, especially, sometimes multiple games to get there. But when he does get there, it works. And having Joe Burrow helps. But part of that goes to Zach Taylor and his ability to develop Joe Burrow. And I think if you look at things that Zach Taylor has excelled at, number one is talent development, especially on the offensive side of the ball. He's developed multiple really good receivers with him and his coaching staff. He's developed the guy we had second in our quarterback rankings last year. He did a really good job with that. And he's hired good staff. Again, having Lou Anarumo as his defensive coordinator has been a huge benefit to Zach Taylor and the Cincinnati Bengals, and he's managed to keep them through multiple coaching cycles too. So he's done a really good job with that. He's done a really good job on both sides of the ball. I don't think he's a perfect coach either, but he does a lot of really good things along with a few bad things.
Yeah, someone who has gotten better every single time we've done this. So we'll see where he ends up next year. Number 19, where are you going?
So this is 18th on my list. This was my favorite one to rank because he got fired last year midseason, but let's go Frank Reich. I don't think everything that went wrong in Indianapolis was Frank Reich's fault. I think that the inability to address the quarterback position and spend in free agency and ended up doing the Colts. I don't think that was Frank Reich's issue. I still thought, he developed Alec Pierce with that team and got him a pretty good rookie season. And so, yeah, I think he did a lot of really good things there. And I have, reasonably high expectations for him in Carolina, too. So I like Frank Reich, and I still think he's a good coach.
Interesting. So, the number I gave him is going to feel like I'm a lot lower on him than I actually am, because I kind of agree with you that there are things to like about Reich, and I thought he kind of got a raw deal when he got fired. I did have him at 28 on my board. I did have him as currently a bottom 5 head coach, so I am not quite there. I mean, the guy got like you said, he got fired last year. It's hard to feel too great about him. I do feel like he's kind of a some of the analytics stuff is very good. I definitely give him credit for that, but it's kind of the way he runs his offense. I just don't know if it really can get you a ton of wins. It can get you to the playoffs, but I don't know if it can really get you that much further. Again, he won a Super Bowl in Philadelphia, but there's a little bit of a difference in that team, I think, than kind of the scheme that they have now they had in Indianapolis. But again, he's an adult in the room. I don't hate the hire for Carolina, especially now that we know that they're going after a quarterback. Get someone who can kind of just be, put a guy in a, it's not going to be a disastrous situation or anything like that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have like a ton of bad things to say about Reich, but I'm not overly impressed with this hire either.
I guess here's a couple. Do you think he ran that offense because that's what he wanted to run, or do you think that's what his personnel was? Because this was a team that historically hasn't. We like Michael Pittman. We think he's a good receiver. But if you start ranking number 1 receivers on each team, is he in the top 20 of number 1 receivers?
No.
Probably not. And this team, those first couple of years, he did develop Carson Wentz. Now, it went terribly at the end, but he did a very good job initially with Carson Wentz. But he still did a pretty good job early on, and to the point that they won a Super Bowl.
Right. No, I'm saying, but he was gone. When it really went off the rails, he wasn't there in Philadelphia anymore.
Yeah, and he had pass catchers there. And, I'm willing to give him another chance here to develop a quarterback and give it a shot. I just think, he had a stud running back, and he didn't have, the best receiving options, and he didn't have the best quarterback options. And I think he just kind of said, this is kind of how I want to play and, rely on this good defense. I'm not saying it was the perfect strategy, but that's probably what he was looking at that point, right?
It's totally possible. It's possible I'm giving him blame for what I should be talking about the Colts organization and the Colts general management and stuff like that. But that's why I had him there.
Yeah. So I mean, it'll be interesting. This is probably going to be his last chance to be a good head coach. And they're giving him a chance to develop a quarterback. So we'll see how he does it again.
Yeah. Number 20 on the list, I am going Mike McCarthy, 19 on my board. A guy who, again, his issues are his issues. He's apparently going to, I'm concerned about him calling plays next year. I am. I'm concerned about that. I don't like that. I like him better as kind of the guy who hires good coordinators and can this be sort of the goofy motivational guy who smashes watermelons, and that's what he does. Definitely the best thing Mike McCarthy has done is hire Dan Quinn. Like that's definitely like the number one thing. That's been a great sort of marriage there in Dallas. I don't know. I don't think Mike McCarthy's a terrible head coach. He is someone who I believe has been 31st on this list before. I don't think that would be fair where he's at now, but I don't think he's a great head coach either. You always every year at some point say that he should win coach of the year. So, I'm surprised he fell here to 20.
Yeah, I had him 22nd. I'm very skeptical of the he's going to run the offense next year. I'm just really skeptical of it. But at the same time, like he's managed to hire good staff over the year. I did not think Kellen Moore was the best offensive coordinator in football or anything like that. but I'm just skeptical of the idea of McCarthy going in and running that offense next season. So we'll see how that works. But like you said, he hired a very good defensive coordinator, which has worked out the last few years. And, he's done a good job in Dallas. It hasn't obviously been a great job, but as far as, he's a team with a $40 million quarterback who wasn't in our top 10 this year and has still done pretty well with the team year after year. So I think there's some credit that needs to go his way.
And has hilarious end of the season play calls. The last play call of the season every year is just fantastic.
Yes, it is. So, I guess I don't know. Like, he's definitely one of the people that it's like, I think the perception is a lot lower than the reality. And a lot of it is because his bad is so egregiously bad.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like, I don't know, do you trust Mike McCarthy to help, elevate this team any further than what he has?
No. I think I think this is where he's fine, like a fine head coach. You don't feel terrible about him, but like you're probably not gonna, he's not gonna win you a Super Bowl or anything.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Mm-hmm. But he has won a Super Bowl, I guess, so he has that going for him. 21. Where are you going?
All right, this is 19th on my board, taking him at 21. This is a huge expectations year for Kevin Stefanski, and I really want to see how it looks in Cleveland this year, because I think you can kind of give him a pass for last year a little bit, even the last 2 years a little bit, because, Mayfield obviously had his struggles 2 years ago. He got hurt too, playing hurt, and then they eventually had to dump him for Case Keenum. And then last year, obviously, his quarterback couldn't play until week 13. And then at that point, when he came in on December 4th, he hadn't played football in a year and a half. So I think he gets a level of pass for that. I think he gets a little bit of a benefit of the doubt. But Cleveland has now spent a lot of money on this roster year after year after year. And they spent a lot of money and a lot of draft capital to bring Deshaun Watson in. This is the year we really have to see the results. And we have to see the coach of 3 years ago that won the coach of the year, that looked like one of the best young head coaches in football. This is the year we really have to see that. So I think I'm willing to give Stefanski the pass, and I still think he's a good coach. I still like a lot of the stuff he does, but the expectations are now that there's going to be wins, and this translates to success.
Yeah, so I also lower on Stefanski. Had him at number 27 on my board. It's I kind of feel like Kevin Stefanski might be like the catch-up of NFL head coaches. Of like, definitely not, depending on the thing, can definitely make something better. Can make it a solid thing. But are you ever going to have like a great meal with ketchup as a main ingredient? Right? That's kind of how I feel about Stefanski. Of like, I think he's a fine head coach. I do think when he won Coach of the Year, he pretty much just put a square peg into a square hole. Like, I think it was pretty clear what he should have done. Freddie Kitchens just like couldn't figure it out. Again, he deserved credit for that. A lot of head coaches don't put the square peg in the square hole, but still, I just don't know. I don't know. He's fine. He's a fine head coach. Ketchup is fine, but I'm not gonna buy an $100 bottle of ketchup.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's fair, and like I said, it's been a few years since he's really had his best sort of performances, but would you be shocked if Cleveland's awesome next season?
I'll say this. I'd be more surprised if Kevin Stefanski is considered like a top 10 head coach next year than if he's fired next year.
You'd be more surprised if he's that good?
Yeah, I'd be more surprised if we think of him as a top 10 head coach than if he's fired.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I don't know. I think we're still not really like sold on this Cleveland experiment working out.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like, if Watson looks like Watson of a few years ago, which I think is a real possibility now that he's going to have training camp, preseason, all that stuff, you still got Chubb, you still got, Amari Cooper, you still got Njoku, you still got a pretty good offensive line. Zadarius Smith is on this team now with Myles Garrett. Like, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if like Cleveland's 13-4 next year, honestly.
Sure, but I think he's fine. He's fine. He's a fine head. Like that's how again, ketchup isn't bad. You have DG in the chat saying Jackson confirmed not a ketchup on hot dog guy. No, I do put ketchup on a hot dog. I think it's fine, but I don't think ketchup on a hot dog is like this gourmet meal.
Yeah, I actually don't like ketchup on hot dog.
Oh, what do you do?
Strictly mustard.
Okay, I do ketchup and mustard.
Yeah, if onions or sauerkraut's an option too, I enjoy that. With mustard. I also don't do ketchup with fries, so
yeah, I've always just been just eat the fries. I don't know, be an adult.
I'm a big mayo with fries person. I think that's actually good. Underrated.
Okay, that's odd.
It's not odd in some areas, but
I've done mayo mixed with ketchup before, but I've never done just straight mayo before.
it's good. I would recommend it.
Okay. Carlos says never put ketchup on anything. Let us know in the chat. Is fries and mayo, is that a thing? Just eat the fries. Terrible take. I mean, if I have like chicken tenders with like buffalo sauce, I'll dip it into buffalo sauce too. But if I get like a burger and fries and it comes to fries, I just eat the fries. If they're well seasoned, you don't need anything else.
I actually think ketchup on burgers better than ketchup on hot dog. But
This is a terrible take.
Mustard is still my primary ingredient.
Interesting.
For
I feel like, again, depends on the burger, but I feel like if it's a nice burger, you don't put ketchup on it.
Well, yeah, nice burger. That's a different conversation.
Uh-huh.
If it's like if I'm going to Whataburger, I'll get some ketchup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. DG says ranch on fries is the way. Kyle won't like that take.
Yeah, I'm not a ranch person. We've been through this. Blue cheese is the way. Ranch is for children. That's how I feel.
All right. Well, let's move on. Good talk on the Kevin Stefanski stuff. Number 22. I'm going with a guy who really could get fired next year. I think there's a real chance he does, Arthur Smith.
Yeah.
Because it's been such a long rebuild for Atlanta. I don't really think it's his fault that they haven't had success. I mean, they haven't had the team, and still now, I don't think have the team. I still like Arthur Smith though. I still think he does a pretty good job of like he has a game plan. He's trying to build the roster to fit that scheme, and it's just going to take some time for him to do it. And they're still not there now.
Yeah, I mean, I have Arthur Smith 23rd. So I'm pretty close as well. But I feel like Atlanta really quietly won 7 games last year, and just nobody talked about it. And I think Arthur Smith is getting hates because he hasn't made Kyle Pitts the greatest tight end in the NFL history, which is what everybody's expectations were. But at the same time, based on basically not having a quarterback that's really been worth investing in at this point, and marginal offensive talent, not a very strong defense, I think he's done a pretty good job. This team scored 365 points last year without a real quarterback. I don't know how much you can vault him for that.
Yeah, I mean, he won as many games as Robert Saleh did last year.
Yeah, I thought I thought he was pretty good. He was number 1 in the NFC South in scoring, which I guess shouldn't be
high praise.
Not the highest praise, but at the same time, he's. I just feel like if they had anybody that could competently throw the ball and show some promise, like you said, he won 7 games. He scored as many points as the Giants last year. I thought he did a pretty good job based on what that roster is in Atlanta.
Yeah, the thing against him is just we haven't seen him with a talented roster, and we want to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean it's hard. It's hard to put a guy higher than the low 20s whose crowning achievement is going 7-10.
Right, exactly. Also, you don't know. Mister says in the chat, ketchup on steak? ? Ban for life. Banning you for life.
Yeah, get out of the chat. I know someone who puts sour cream on steak too.
Yeah, that's
what are we doing here? Ruin the steak. Ruin the steak. Unbelievable.
Kyle, 23. Where are you going?
I had no idea what to do with this guy because I thought he was the luckiest coach on the planet last year. There was clearly some sort of horseshoe up his ass situation. Kevin O'Connell, I had 21, I guess. It was a good year. I thought he did better stuff with the offense than what Mike Zimmer did, but I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota sucks next year, honestly. Nobody bought into that team last year. Nobody paying attention bought into that team last year. But he did win the game, so I don't really know what to do with that information. So I guess he's 21.
Yeah, I mean that's just again he's one of those guys where I wasn't overly impressed with the X's and O's or anything, but they won games. They won way more games than they should have last year. So you kind of gotta feel somewhat good about him. I actually had him at 21 on my list as well, so we're both in lockstep there.
Yeah, like I said, I can't fault him for his team being lucky. I just don't know what my expectations are for Kevin O'Connell for the future. Like I said, I think he did a little bit better stuff on the offensive side of the ball. I thought he was a little more progressive with it. But I don't know. It wasn't a 13-win team, that's for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. Interesting stuff with Kevin O'Connell. I think we need another year to really fully evaluate him. Number 24, I'm going Ron Rivera. Again, guy who's great guy. He seems like one of the all-time guys. And there's something to that. It seems like he's a good leader for sure. It does feel a bit like his scheme is kind of a bit built in the past. We are talking about, the year we look at with Ron Rivera was 2015 at this point. That was already 8 years ago. Feels like it was recently. No, it has been a bit of time at this point. Again, solid head coach. I don't think there's too many things to dislike about him. I had number 22 on my board, so I didn't have him as a bottom 10 head coach, but he's kind of in that, like, you feel fine about him, but you don't feel great about him as your head coach.
Yeah, I had him 24th on my list. So this is right in lockstep. And he's just one of those guys where it's like, if you find a coach better than him, you're probably pretty happy. If you find a coach worse than him, you're a little concerned, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. I don't think he's a bad coach, but like, going back to Carson Wentz in the last game of the season probably docked him 2 more spots for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was one of the dumbest decisions I've ever seen.
I kind of didn't hate it. It was a disaster, but I kind of understood the logic behind it. Like, Heineke wasn't good. Like, you have this quarterback you're paying big money to who was good the year before, was solid the year before. I got the logic. It blew up in his face. It was a disaster, but like, I understood the logic.
I don't know. Like, yes, I 100% understand. I understand the thinking behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm just like, I don't know. Like, it just feels like, yes, I understand the thinking behind it, but then you get to the point where you're saying Carson Wentz is playing a big game for me, and you have to trust that. It's like saying, yeah, James Harden sounds great until you need
Right.
James Harden in the game 7 on the road to come up big, and you're just like, oh wait, this guy does the same crap every time.
Yeah.
Like, and then shockingly, he throws 3 interceptions. So I don't know. That bothered me. But at the same time, like, I still think, he had a good defense, and I thought the offense was actually pretty good. And, I wouldn't be, this is one of my things. I think if Jacoby Brissett's their quarterback last year, as he's probably going to be this year, I think this team could be pretty good. And I think Rivera could look pretty good doing it.
Yeah. Although, to say, we've said this for years now, and they keep kind of falling short of what we expect them to do.
Yeah, I don't know. The roster's probably better than or probably a little worse than we actually think it is, but I don't think it's a bad roster. All
right. 25. Where are you going?
Matt Eberflus. Definitely not a perfect year. He ended up with the worst record in the league. But I do think he gets some credit for kind of evaluating this Justin Fields thing and saying, let's change how we're going to run this offense and alter everything. And he made those adjustments, and all of a sudden it was at least watchable. We all looked at this team in the offseason and said this roster is bottom 5. We said this is a bottom 5 roster. We said this was going to be a really hard job to take over. And shockingly, they won 3 games, and it was a really hard job from day one. So I can't really blame them too much. Obviously, we need a little more in year 2. We need to see, steps in the right direction. There has to be there has to be some sort of linear sort of development to his coaching. But at the same time, I thought he did a good job, as good of a job as he could last year with Justin Fields. And with this roster being terrible, I thought he did what he could, but it wasn't by any means perfect.
Yeah, I do wonder again, is this another example of he put the square peg into the square hole kind of thing of like, you did the right thing, but also, you should do the right thing in this scenario of sort of utilizing Justin Fields that way. But again, you get some credit for that. You absolutely do. And I think everything else is just like a to be determined. Like, I don't know. Like, his defense could work, but like they have no players. So how do I know? Like, the rest of the offense could work. They have no players. I don't know. We need to give him another year. Hard to evaluate.
Yeah, I mean, he thrived in Indianapolis as a defensive coordinator with an elite secondary. And then he goes to Chicago, which has maybe the worst secondary in football. Right. So I don't really know how he's supposed to implement his scheme when his scheme thrives on having a good secondary. It's just it's an impossible scenario.
Yeah. Carlos says in the chat, yeah, Eberflus needs 2 years. I think I agree with Carlos on that. 26. Give me the first head coach who has never been a head coach before off of this list. D'Amico Ryans. Listen, getting guys from the Shanahan coaching tree, always a fan of that. Anytime you can do that, seems like a good idea. Seems like, a guy who we expect to check every single box. The issue is we've never seen him be the head coach of a football team before, but that's still enough here at 26, to put him ahead of 4 guys who we have seen coach a football team before.
Yeah, I had him 27th. He was my second new head coach.
Okay.
Disregarding Sean Payton, obviously. But, Yeah, he was my second new head coach. I'm really excited for his coaching tenure. I think he can be a very good head coach. Um, and it just seems like guys really gravitate towards him. He has that sort of there's a lot of similarities to Salah. Um, besides that, they're both San Francisco defensive coordinators involved. There's a lot of similarities there to what seemed like their coaching styles and the way they kind of approach things. I think he's got a really hard job though, and I'm curious to see how that's going to play out. I think he's got a tough job to try and fix this Houston franchise, which has just been, loser culture of the last 4 or 5 years. I don't, that's a hard thing to kind of fix, and I'm curious to see how that works day one.
Yeah, totally agree. The last time we saw hope with the Texans, they were up 24-0 against the Chiefs.
Yeah. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough job. So we'll see what happens. I'm hoping for the best for him. I want to see him succeed. Obviously a former Texan guy. He knows that place there well, and he's going to get, I think for a change, he's going to get a pretty long leash because of what he meant to that franchise before. And with a new quarterback, they're finally seeming like they're going to try and be a little more competitive.
Yeah. 27. Where are you going?
I had him 26th, my highest new head coach. Give me Shane Steichen, another guy who I think deserves some credit for the Jalen Hurts development and what he did with that offense last year. And I'm pretty excited to see what he could do with Andy Richardson too. So, give me Shane here, and I think he could be a very good coach hire.
Yeah, I mean he's gotten the most out of two, with Jalen Hurts and with Justin Herbert. He's gotten the most out of multiple quarterbacks at this point and helped develop them very well. So I totally could see this working out. In Indianapolis as well. Again, Richardson might be a tougher, I don't know, a tougher mold here to crack than the other ones. Is that an expression? I don't think so, but it sounds right. I think that I'm very fascinated in seeing what he can do. But yeah, I'm with you. I had him one spot below D'Amico Ryans. They're kind of in the same tier for me.
Yeah, they were the two I thought good new hires of the offseason.
Oh,
and I'm not going to be nice at the end of this, but it's okay. It's our podcast. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what he can do. I think that he is. I think he's well equipped to develop Anthony Richardson. It's going to take time, but I think he's well equipped to do it, and I'm excited.
Okay, well, let's talk about the guy you don't think is well equipped to do it. Jonathan Gannon, I'm picking at 28 on this list. You said two new head coaching hires you were a fan of. So Jonathan Gannon, I'm assuming, is not the one you loved so much. I don't know. I don't dislike Jonathan Gannon as this hire that much. Like, I think that definitely the last game in Philadelphia hurts the Cardinals. And I'm never a fan of defensive coordinator hires in general, which is why he was the third on my list. But I'm not going to say this was like a disastrous hire or anything.
You
hate this hire?
Yes, I am usually higher on defensive coordinator hires than you. I'm willing to give anybody a chance as a head coach, because as long as you're willing to play both sides of the ball and coach both sides of the ball and let the offense grow and develop, I think a defensive coordinator can be a good head coach. The issue is that I don't even think he's a good defensive coordinator. Honestly, I thought he thrived last year with an elite talent. I don't know how many defensive coordinators could go into that situation and be bad.
Patricia could have.
That's my comparison for Jonathan Gannon.
Wow. Okay, that feels very okay. Go ahead, but that feels very harsh.
I mean, they had elite. TJ Edwards was fantastic last year. They had great pass rush. They had great guys in the middle of the defensive line too. They added so many pieces to that secondary. How could Jonathan Gannon have failed last year? And it was the most vanilla. It was the most boring. It was the most short-sighted defense I think I've ever seen in football. And they had so much talent to do different things. And he just kept running the same scheme and the same coverage over and over and over again, and let these elite defensive players make plays, which is like, yeah, I have elite players. I'm just going to do that. But at the same time, it just seemed like that they were unwilling to get creative, unwilling to adjust, and they got torched in a few games because of it, despite having all that defensive talent. And now he's going to a team with no talent. I just don't think it's going to work. I think it's going to be a disaster, and I'm just not high on this guy as a coach. I don't think it's going to be that great.
Okay. Well, first off, Part of why I feel I'm a little bit higher on him is just the difficulty of evaluating head coaches. I'm still willing to say a guy who, even if he doesn't look like a great hire, is still better than the bottom four that I have on my list. That's just kind of how I view it. I don't know. Uh, Again, definitely put a square peg in a square hole type of guy. He saw that, okay, maybe just play cover 2 zone and let our great players make great plays, and it worked out well. Okay, yeah, it's pretty simple. But again, you deserve a little bit of credit for that, I think. I think got a lot of criticism for how that Super Bowl was handled, which, the Patricia comparison certainly apt there. Both guys came off having their defense get crushed in a losing effort in the Super Bowl. I don't know how much that was his fault, though. I really don't. I think he kind of took too much blame for it. I'm not saying there aren't things you can look back on and criticize, but I don't know if I don't think he deserved as much blame as maybe he got for it. And the reason why I kind of am intrigued by this hire, and I think if you're a Cardinals fan who's arguing for Gannon, what you're going to say, which I think is at least to some degree fair, is that you're getting a guy from a well-ran organization that thinks smartly. The Eagles think smartly. That's something you can just, I don't know if there's any team right now that just consistently makes more intelligent moves than the Eagles. And so getting someone who has that philosophy in your organization, I think is maybe a benefit that you're overlooking a bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's very well impossible. I guess here's the thing. Like, the good quarterbacks they played last season, Jared Goff went off. Like, if we looked at a guys we ranked in the top 5, I had ranked in the top 15 quarterbacks last season. Jared Goff went off. They did good against Kirk Cousins, which was a Monday night game. So, Monday night Kirk Cousins is different than regular Kirk Cousins. You go way down the list. Trevor Lawrence, they did pretty well against Trevor Lawrence, but part of that too was they were also playing in like a monsoon. And I think that played a big part in their struggles. Then you go to Aaron Rodgers, put 33 on them, playing, and got hurt at the end of it. They had a chance to win that game. You go further down the list, then you get to Dak Prescott hung 40 on them in a loss. And then you get to injured, Patrick Mahomes injured, putting 38 on them. And honestly, part of my thing with that Super Bowl and why I kept coming back to it is a lot of the stuff Kansas City did in that Super Bowl looked very similar to the Week 1 stuff Detroit did to them, looked very similar to the Green Bay stuff from Week 12, and looked very similar to the Week 16 stuff for Dallas. And it just seemed like that they failed to adjust their game plan to that. So I thought that was a bit of an issue.
I get it. It's not a great hire. I have it as my least favorite coaching hire. We could go all day about Jonathan Gannon. We have to eventually move on. Number 28, 4 coaches left. Where are you going?
Josh McDaniels. If we're looking at these, yeah, he was 28th on my list. I'm getting him 29 here. Like, these bottom 4 definitely seem like the 4 guys on the hot seat. They're definitely the lowest rated coaches for a reason. A lot went wrong. I still think McDaniels is going to call a pretty good offense, and I still think he's going to do that. But obviously, he hasn't shown anything that's willing to prove that he's going to be a good head coach in the NFL. And that's the problem.
Yeah, and even the offense, like, I think it was still underwhelming, given the fact that they were a playoff team the year before and then added Devontae Adams. I think they underwhelmed. Like, I think Hunter Renfrow had a down year, Darren Waller had a down year once that happened. So it's like, is that just luck? Maybe, but again, we've seen him fail as a head coach before, and I think the Raiders are going in the wrong direction, not the right one, with him currently as head coach. So I don't know. McDaniels, great offensive coordinator, does not seem to be, but even that, it feels like he's a bit behind the times on that stuff as well at this point. So I'm with you. I had him at number 30 on my list.
You had him 30th? Okay. Yeah, I'd be curious to see. I think these 4 coaches, I think you could talk me into any particular order, but I think it's very clear who the bottom 4 is. Although I had Jonathan Gannon 32nd, so we'll see.
Oh, okay. Right. Of course. Yeah, makes sense. Number 30, I'm going Brandon Staley. I just don't get this guy. I just can't figure him out. I had him at number 29 on my list. And it's like, at least when he first started, I got Brandon Staley. If you like him, if you dislike him, you could understand his philosophy. He was trying to establish something, which I get. But then this last year, it seemed like he completely went away with it. And like, I guess you made the playoffs. Good work. But like, you didn't. You were basically the exact same team you were the year before, going away from this stuff. And I think it actually hurt them. Like, the analytics stuff worked that first year, but the couple times it didn't work happened to be on prime time, and that became a story, and he went away with it for whatever reason. The defensive stuff, I still feel like it was an interesting experiment, but it hasn't. Again, it kind of went away with that a little bit as well, and feels like when it goes to it, it's not working either. I just don't get what Staley is doing, and the offensive play calling has been very stale. So, someone who I was very excited about, I think is interesting, and I do think out of the four, he's the one guy I could see surprising us next year in a positive way. I think he's the one I could see maybe finding a way to have his strategy go through. But as of right now, I'm mostly just confused by him.
Yeah, I think all that's fair. You've always been a little higher on him than me, but I mean, at the same time, I had him 29th on this list. He was my next in the bottom four rankings. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, there's just no more excuses for him. They fired the offensive coordinator because they've said it was the offensive coordinator or him, basically. And so, yeah, I think that it was I think he's obviously the next step if it doesn't work out. So he's got to prove himself this season with this team. There's too much talent in Los Angeles for this team to fail as much as they have. And yes, they showed progress and they made the playoffs last year. But 27-0 is embarrassing, man. 27-0 and losing is embarrassing. And they got to fix this. He's got to fix this. And he is firmly on the hot seat. So a lot of pressure on Staley. They changed coordinators, and I'm curious to see how he does. And like you said, I don't know if it was a management decision to go down and say the fourth down stuff has to stop or what, but he clearly, whatever his beliefs were before, they changed. And I don't know what it was, but it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and again, it worked his first year. Like, people harp on the losses because those were in primetime games and in games people watch, but it worked more than it failed for him. Also, Herbert's in the last year of his deal. So, or not the last year of his deal because he has the 5th-year option, but the last year of getting cheap quarterback play. Goes up to $29 million. Herbert's contract. You have now Quentin Johnson, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. They should be competing for a Super Bowl this year. They should have been with Cincinnati. Like, there's no reason that Cincinnati should be so far ahead of the Chargers right now. And that's not all on Staley, but it's partially on Staley.
Yeah, completely agree. So he's on the hot seat. It'll be interesting because, I mean, this is going to be a really popular job if he gets fired too. So,
oh yeah.
That I think was the surprising thing about this last season, especially when a guy like Sean Payton was available, they had the opportunity to pull the trigger and they didn't. And I thought that was surprising. But we'll see how he does.
We'll see how he does. 2 coaches left, 2 NFC South defensive-minded coaches still on the board. 2 guys who have competed a lot against each other with the Buccaneers and Saints head coach. Which one are you picking at 31, and which one will you leave for me to pick at 32?
30th on my list here, I'm going to go with Todd Bowles. Look, Todd Bowles is going to coach a good defense. That's what he does.
Yep.
He is always going to have a good defense, which I guess, you could say puts a floor on your team, which is probably why when, he won this division, he won the division his first year. And, I think it's reasonably fair to say this team might not be in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes because of that. However, you had Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. You had all these guys and you scored 313 points. You were doing quick look here, peek here. You were the second lowest scoring team in the NFC last season with Tom Brady. That just is inexcusable behavior. And they changed offensive coordinators, but part of my thing, I'm willing to give everybody a good chance to be a good head coach. I don't hate defensive coordinators. You hate defensive coordinators. I do not hate defensive coordinators. I'm willing to give everyone a chance to be a good head coach. But if you're going to be a defensive coordinator who moves up to a head coaching position, you have to understand that the offense runs the world now. Everything is about quarterbacks and offense. And so you have to be able to take a step back as a defensive coordinator and say, I want my defense to be really good. Everybody wants a good defense, but a good offense is more important than a good defense. And you have to be willing to let your good defense work with a good offense. He clearly was not willing to let his offense breathe and marinate a little bit because he was concerned about the defense, putting the defense in a bad position to fail. And he can't do that anymore. That's just not how the league works.
Yeah. Well, Todd Bowles is exactly why I say don't hire defensive coordinators as head coaches. It's because they tend to lean towards making decisions that help out their defense, which, does not work. Todd Bowles, the offensive coaching was a disaster last year. It was just a disaster. I mean, and he's a guy who plenty of people, including myself, at one point said, you just got to fire him in the middle of the season. It's like, this just isn't working. Let's just get a new guy in here and try to figure something out. He did kind of waste the last year with Brady. The game management stuff was at times a disaster. I still think about that Cleveland game where Cleveland had no timeouts left, and they were inside. It was 1st and goal. So for Tampa Bay, there was no harm in calling your own timeouts, saving clock in case Cleveland tied it. You have another opportunity to drive down the field, and for some reason he didn't do it. There's so many issues. The positive, like you said, he's still a great offensive coordinator, or excuse me, still a great defensive coordinator, and that put him above number 32 on my list as well because of that upside. But the issues were just terrible, and again, yes, he won the division, but he took a team that won a Super Bowl 2 years before he became head coach. They lost on a last-second field goal due to the team that won the Super Bowl the following year, and they had tied for the most wins in football that year, and then they won 8 games the following year and only got in due to a bad division. I mean, it was a disaster last year, about as bad of a year as you could have as a first-year head coach who made the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it was bad. And, obviously you are a Bucs fan. I am obviously, Tom Brady I've been a fan of Tom Brady since I was a kid. So we are going to be a little more biased on this,
Mm-hmm.
It's just like you watch some of those games though, and you want to pull your hair out. Like, It wasn't even just that. It was just such like mind-bogglingly bad decision-making from strategy, game plan, execution, play calling, game management. All of it was bad. All of it was bad, and it never made any sense, anything that they did on the offensive side of the ball. And it was so bizarre to watch that happen and watch it unfold. And we kept saying, like, okay, they would put together a good drive, and it's like, okay, maybe they figured this out. Or, as we talked about it all last season, when they're at the end of these games and they just said, okay, Brady, just go back there, call plays, make throws.
Right.
We're going to play quick. And all of a sudden this offense looks really good in stretches at the end of these games. And you're like, okay, just run the no huddle the whole time. Just let Brady just stand back there and, make reads. They just go back to doing the same thing over again. And we were just like, why wouldn't you just do what's working, which is letting Brady cook? And they just didn't. And it was so odd. It was one of the most bizarre seasons I've ever seen.
Yeah, the best thing you could say about Todd Bowles was that with about 10 minutes left against Carolina, with the division on the line, he finally said, okay, Brady, go hurry up, call the plays, and try to make something happen.
Yeah. And
which usually isn't a great thing when the best thing you do is say, you know what, don't listen to me.
Yeah, that would be fair. But yeah, they finally just put the ball in Brady's hands and that stuff would work. And then they go right back to, let's establish the run game and just do the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm. It's only going to get worse now in the post-Brady era, so we'll see. But he did not become the worst head coach on this list. Dennis Allen, to me, the difference between Allen and Bowles is at least Bowles still has the defensive stuff. And I think that Allen, the defense also took a step back when he became head coach, which is why I put him at 32.
Yeah, I had him 31. But of the non-Jonathan Gannon era, he was the my lowest head coach, and I'm just not really sure what he does well. Honestly, I'm not really sure what he. It doesn't seem like that he provides a ton of leadership to that head coach spot. It doesn't seem like he, approached a lot of games with a good strategy. He just kind of seemed to be, I don't know. It seemed like the Saints just felt like dead men walking last year, right? Like there was nothing interesting about watching the Saints, and that was with like Chris Olave had a really good rookie year. And there's still really good players on the defensive side of the ball for this team. And we just it just seemed like there was nothing really interesting or galvanizing about this team.
Yeah, I completely agree. If you're Dennis Allen, why not just go to Denver and be the defensive coordinator for Sean Payton again? Why not just say, like, hey, isn't this better for all of us if we just, I go to Denver, you guys can hire a new head coach? Aren't we all winning here?
I'm sure, maybe next season, but obviously, he obviously has the ambition to be a head coach, but
I guess the paycheck, I guess that's probably part of it.
The thing that was so interesting was just we knew how bad of a head coach he was before last year because he had the chance before and it looked terrible. And we're like, okay, maybe he'll learn some things. And it turns out it looks kind of the same.
Yeah, when has that happened where a guy had a head coaching job? I feel like that's been a trend. We've seen this with a few guys now, with McDaniels, Allen, and Bowles, who all are at the bottom of the list. Maybe these guys who don't work as a head coach. Okay, it worked out for Bill Belichick. All right, but I feel like maybe there's a reason why some of these guys don't work out.
Yeah. I guess it worked. It worked out for Pete Carroll, but that was also decades later.
Right.
So I'm trying to think of even who would be the best example for that beyond those guys.
Adam Gase didn't work out too well there.
Did not work out too well for Adam Gase. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's gonna, put a big spotlight on my Frank Reich pick too. So we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see if something happens, but yeah. All right. That is our show. A bit of a long show, but we had a lot to get to. So many head coaches. Kyle, let them know who can find us on Twitter before they head out.
Yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter at Jackson Kruger. Make sure to follow me at by Kyle Gronin, and make sure to follow the account page at On the Sideline JK. That's at On the Sideline JK.
Yes. Of course, if you like audio only podcasts, if you like to listen to your podcast instead of watch it on YouTube, we have the audio only feed. We post that anywhere you get your podcast. That should be available. Just search On the Sideline Podcast. Again, thank you everybody for watching. Kyle, any final thoughts?
No, gonna go watch some NBA tonight. So excited for that. Sorry about James Harden.
Yeah, I mean, we knew James Harden wasn't going to show. I mean, that's what he does. I was not expecting James Harden to come through in Game 7. Embiid had to do better.
I was waiting for your tweet. James Harden is so back with the Game 7 performance.
Yeah, that would have been good actually. I should have done that. Yeah, that would have been funny. I didn't think about that.
He's certainly an interesting player.
I've never seen someone like it who just consistently is so good games like 1 through 4, and then it's just nowhere to be found.
Well, he was good in Game 1, disaster in 2 and 3, good in 4, good in 5, and then disaster 6 and 7. It was bizarre. To answer Desty, what OC is most likely to be hired as a head coach next year? My pick is Ben Johnson.
Which one is Ben Johnson again?
Lions offensive.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
I think he could have had a job this year, but he kind of pulled his name out a little early. So I think he's going to be a head coach sooner than later.
I think it hurts him that he has such a boring name. Even I couldn't remember. Even I was like, Ben Johnson? Like, who's that?
Yeah, that's fair. He needs spruce that up a little.
So. Yeah, go with do like when Homer Simpson named himself like Max Powers. You gotta do something.
Yeah, I don't know if he's married, but maybe he could do like a hyphen name situation.
Yeah,
that'll help, be good. Hyphen names usually, are a little interesting. So maybe that's something to look into for him.
Yeah, Ben Johnson in Jigba.
I think that'd be a little controversial, but we'll see.
Okay. Yes. All right. Well, okay. That is our final thoughts. Thank you to everybody again. We do appreciate it. Yeah. And until next time, have a good one.
Peace.